Hey, fellow witches and wizards, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're slithering into one of the most complex and tragic stories in the entire wizarding world. We're talking about Nagini, not just Voldemort's terrifying pet snake, but a woman with a heartbreaking curse, a loyal companion, and ultimately, a Horcrux that held a piece of the Dark Lord's soul. So grab your wands, and let's uncoil the complete story of one of the most misunderstood characters in magical history. Let's start at the beginning, and I mean the real beginning. Long before Nagini became the massive, terrifying snake we know from the Harry Potter series, she was actually a woman. Yes, you heard that right. Nagini was born as a human, but she carried within her one of the most tragic curses in the magical world, the Maledictus curse. Now, what exactly is a Maledictus? It's an incredibly rare blood curse that affects only women, passed down through family lines. This curse causes the carrier to gradually and permanently transform into a beast. And here's the truly heartbreaking part. Once the transformation is complete, there's no going back. The human consciousness is lost forever, trapped within the animal form. In Nagini's case, her beast form was that of a massive snake, but in the 1920s, when we first meet her in the Fantastic Beasts series, she still had control over her transformations. She could shift between her human form and her snake form at will, but this ability was temporary, and she knew it. So where do we first encounter Nagini? In one of the most exploitative and disturbing settings imaginable, the Circus Arcanus in Paris, 1927. This wasn't your typical magical circus, it was a traveling freak show that captured and displayed magical creatures and cursed individuals for entertainment. Nagini was one of the main attractions, forced to transform into her snake form and perform for gawking audiences. The circus owner Skender kept her and other attractions under strict control, essentially treating them as prisoners. This wasn't entertainment, it was exploitation of the most vulnerable members of the magical community. But Nagini wasn't alone in her suffering. She formed a close bond with Credence Barebone, who was also being used by the circus. Credence, if you remember, was the powerful Obscurial we met in the first Fantastic Beasts film. Both of them were trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Credence with his dangerous Obscurus, and Nagini with her irreversible curse. Their friendship was built on understanding and shared trauma. They both knew what it felt like to be seen as monsters, to be feared and exploited. When they finally escaped the circus together, it marked the beginning of Nagini's journey toward her ultimate fate. After escaping the circus, Nagini and Credence found themselves in the heart of wizarding Paris, desperately seeking answers about their conditions. Credence was obsessed with discovering his true identity and family history, while Nagini was facing the terrifying reality that her curse was progressing. Think about how terrifying this must have been for her. Every day, she could feel herself losing more and more of her humanity. The transformations were becoming harder to control, lasting longer, and she knew that eventually, she would transform for the final time and never return to her human form. This fear and desperation made both Nagini and Credence vulnerable to manipulation, and unfortunately, there was someone waiting to take advantage of that vulnerability. Grindelwald, one of the most dangerous dark wizards in history. Grindelwald was a master manipulator who specialized in finding broken, desperate people and convincing them that he alone could solve their problems. He approached Credence with promises about his true identity and offered hope where there had been none. But here's where things get really tragic for Nagini. While Grindelwald was focused on recruiting Credence, she found herself caught up in the dark wizard's web as well. As Credence became more involved with Grindelwald's cause, Nagini was faced with an impossible choice: abandon her closest friend, or follow him down a dark path that went against everything she believed in. And this is where we see the true strength of Nagini's character. Despite her own desperate situation, despite knowing that her time as a human was running out, she tried to warn Credence away from Grindelwald. She could see the manipulation for what it was, even when Credence couldn't. During the climactic events at Lachaire's cemetery, we see Nagini making one final attempt to save her friend. She begged him not to go with Grindelwald, to stay with her instead. But Credence, consumed by his need for answers and belonging, chose to leave with the Dark Wizard. This moment, watching her closest friend choose the dark path despite her warnings, was likely one of the last truly human experiences Nagini would ever have. So what happened to Nagini after 1927? This is where the canonical information becomes limited, but we can piece together some crucial details. We know that at some point between the late 1920s and the 1940s, Nagini's curse reached its final stage. The Maledictus curse finally claimed her completely. She transformed into her snake form for the last time, and her human consciousness was lost forever. The woman who had tried to save her friend, who had suffered in that terrible circus, who had shown such strength in resisting Grindelwald's manipulation, that woman was gone, trapped forever within the mind of a snake. But the story doesn't end there. Somehow, during these lost years, Nagini crossed paths with another dark wizard, Tom Riddle, who would later become Lord Voldemort. The exact circumstances of their meeting remain unknown, but we do know that by the 1940s, Nagini had become Voldemort's companion. Now, when we first meet Nagini in the Harry Potter series, she appears to be nothing more than an extremely large and dangerous snake. But knowing her true origin makes every scene with her infinitely more tragic. This wasn't just any snake. This was a woman who had been cursed to lose her humanity, and was now being used as a weapon by one of the most evil wizards in history. Voldemort's relationship with Nagini was unique among all his followers. While he viewed other Death Eaters as useful but ultimately disposable tools, he genuinely seemed to care for Nagini. She was his constant companion, often seen coiled around his chair or by his side during important meetings. But their bond went far deeper than mere companionship. In one of his most horrific acts, Voldemort chose Nagini to house one of his Horcruxes, a piece of his own soul. This meant that not only was the woman Nagini had once been lost forever, but her very essence was now corrupted by containing a fragment of Voldemort's evil soul. Think about the cruel irony of this. Nagini, who had once tried to save Credence from the darkness, was now an unwilling vessel for pure evil. Every kill she made, every act of violence she committed in Voldemort's service, was being done by someone who had originally tried to resist the forces of darkness. The revelation that Nagini was a Horcrux came as a shock to many readers and viewers, but it actually explains a lot about Voldemort's behavior toward her. Throughout the series, we see him treating Nagini differently from his other followers. He speaks to her in Parseltongue, shares his thoughts and plans with her, and becomes genuinely enraged when she's threatened. This wasn't just because she was useful to him, it was because she literally contained a piece of his soul. The connection between them was deeper and more intimate than any other relationship Voldemort had. In a twisted way, Nagini was the closest thing to an equal that Voldemort ever acknowledged. But this also made Nagini incredibly dangerous. As a Horcrux, she was nearly indestructible through normal means. She could heal from wounds that would kill ordinary snakes, and she possessed an almost supernatural cunning and cruelty that came from housing Voldemort's soul fragment. We see this supernatural danger throughout the Harry Potter series. Nagini doesn't just attack, she hunts with an intelligence and malevolence that goes beyond animal instinct. Her attack on Arthur Weasley at the Ministry of Magic, her role in Bertha Jorkins' death, and her final confrontation with Snape all showcase a creature that was far more than just a snake. During the Second Wizarding War, Nagini became one of Voldemort's most effective weapons. As the war escalated and Voldemort's other Horcruxes began to be destroyed, he became increasingly protective of her. He knew that as long as Nagini survived, he would remain immortal. This led to one of the most tense aspects of Harry, Ron, and Hermione's Horcrux hunt. They knew they had to destroy Nagini to defeat Voldemort. But how do you kill a massive, magically protected snake that's constantly by the side of the most dangerous wizard alive? The solution came from an unexpected source: Severus Snape. As we learned in his final memories, Snape had been working against Voldemort all along, motivated by his love for Lily Potter and his desire to protect her son, Harry. But Snape's knowledge of Nagini's true nature as a Horcrux would ultimately cost him his life. When Voldemort believed that Snape was the master of the Elder Wand, he needed to kill him to claim the wand's true power, and he used Nagini to do it. The scene where Nagini kills Severus Snape is one of the most emotionally devastating moments in the entire series, but knowing Nagini's backstory adds another layer of tragedy to this moment. Here was a woman who had once tried to save someone from the darkness, now being used as an instrument of murder by the very forces she had once opposed. Voldemort ordered Nagini to kill Snape, not out of anger or revenge, but as a cold, calculated move to gain mastery of the Elder Wand. Snape's death wasn't personal to Voldemort, it was just another step in his quest for ultimate power, and Nagini, with no choice in the matter, carried out the execution. But even in this moment of horror, there's a strange poetry to it. Snape, who had spent years working in secret to protect others, met his end at the hands of another victim of Voldemort's cruelty. Both Snape and the woman who had been Nagini were, in their own ways, prisoners of circumstances beyond their control. The final confrontation came during the Battle of Hogwarts in 1998. By this point, Nagini was one of only 2 remaining Horcruxes, the other being Harry Potter himself. Though he didn't know it at the time, Voldemort was desperate to protect her, keeping her close and surrounding her with magical protection. But the young witches and wizards fighting for Hogwarts were equally determined to destroy her. They knew that as long as Nagini lived, Voldemort could not be defeated. The hunt for the final Horcrux became one of the most crucial aspects of the entire battle. During the fighting, we see Nagini continuing to serve as Voldemort's weapon, attacking defenders and spreading terror throughout the castle. But she was also increasingly vulnerable. With most of his other Horcruxes destroyed, Voldemort could no longer afford to use her as recklessly as he once had. The end came in a moment that perfectly embodied the themes of courage and sacrifice that run throughout the Harry Potter series. As Voldemort prepared for what he thought would be his final victory, Neville Longbottom, the boy who had been overlooked and underestimated for so long, stepped forward with the sword of Gryffindor. In one swift, decisive strike, Neville beheaded Nagini, destroying the final piece of Voldemort's soul that wasn't contained within Harry himself. It was a moment of pure heroism, but also a moment of release for the tortured soul that had once been a woman named Nagini. Think about what this moment really represented. After decades of being trapped within a snake's body, after years of being forced to commit acts of violence and murder, After having her very essence corrupted by containing a piece of Voldemort's soul, Nagini was finally free. Of course, by this point, the woman she had once been was long gone, but there's something poetic about the fact that her death helped ensure Voldemort's defeat, allowing countless others to be saved from the darkness that had claimed her so many years earlier. When you look at Nagini's complete story, from the woman trying to save her friend, from Grindelwald to the snake that had to be destroyed to defeat Voldemort, you see one of the most tragic character arcs in the entire wizarding world. She represents the ultimate victim of dark magic, not just someone who was killed or tortured, but someone whose very identity was stolen from them. The Maledictus curse didn't just change her body. It erased who she was as a person. And then Voldemort's Horcrux magic corrupted even that, turning her into a weapon against everything she had once stood for. In many ways, Nagini's story serves as a warning about the true cost of dark magic. It doesn't just harm its intended victims. It corrupts and destroys everyone it touches, often in ways that can never be undone. From the exploitation at the Circus Arcanus, to Grindelwald's manipulation, to Voldemort's ultimate corruption of her very soul, Nagini's life was shaped by the cruelty and ambition of others. She never chose to become a monster. She was made into one by forces beyond her control. So what can we learn from Nagini's tragic story? First, and most importantly, it reminds us that evil often wears a disguise. The terrifying snake that we feared throughout the Harry Potter series was once a woman who tried to do the right thing, who tried to save her friend from making a terrible mistake. Her story also highlights the importance of understanding and compassion. How many other monsters in the wizarding world might actually be victims of circumstances beyond their control? How many people like Nagini are suffering in silence, feared and hated for conditions they never chose? But perhaps, most importantly, Nagini's story shows us the true horror of dark magic. Not just its immediate effects, but its long-term consequences. The Maledictus curse that claimed her was passed down through generations. Voldemort's Horcrux magic didn't just split his own soul, but corrupted hers as well. Dark magic has a way of spreading its poison far beyond its original target. Nagini's death during the Battle of Hogwarts wasn't just crucial for defeating Voldemort, it also represented the end of a cycle of suffering that had lasted for decades. With her destruction, the last piece of Voldemort's soul was eliminated, allowing Harry to face the Dark Lord as a mortal man. But even more symbolically, it represented the triumph of love and sacrifice over hatred and selfishness. Neville's courage in destroying Nagini, Harry's willingness to sacrifice himself, and the countless acts of heroism throughout the battle all stood in stark contrast to the selfishness and cruelty that had created Nagini's suffering in the first place. In the end, Nagini's story reminds us that while dark magic can cause tremendous suffering, it can never truly defeat the power of love, friendship, and sacrifice. The woman she had once been, the person who tried to save Credence, who resisted Grindelwald's manipulation, who showed strength in the face of impossible circumstances, that spirit of resistance and love ultimately contributed to Voldemort's downfall. Of course, Nagini's story still leaves us with many unanswered questions. How exactly did she meet Tom Riddle? What happened during those lost years between her transformation and her appearance as Voldemort's companion? Did any part of her human consciousness survive within the snake, trapped and aware of what she was being forced to do? We also don't know much about her family history. Were there other women in her bloodline who suffered from the same curse? What was her life like before the circus? Did she have friends, family, dreams, and ambitions that were cut short by her condition? These questions may never be answered, and perhaps that's appropriate. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that leave room for our imagination, that trust us to fill in the gaps with our own understanding of human nature and suffering. So there you have it, the complete, tragic story of Nagini, from a cursed woman trying to save her friend, to a circus performer exploited for entertainment, to a victim of dark magic manipulation, to a weapon in the hands of evil, and finally to her role in one of the most important battles in wizarding history. Her story reminds us that behind every monster, there might be a victim. Behind every act of evil, there might be someone who never chose that path. And most importantly, it shows us that even the darkest magic can be overcome by courage, love, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. Nagini never got the chance for redemption that other characters in the series received. She couldn't choose to change sides like Snape, or find her way back to the light like Draco Malfoy. Her curse made that impossible. But in her death, she played a crucial role in saving the wizarding world from the very darkness that had claimed her. What do you think about Nagini's story? Do you see her as a victim or a villain? How do you think her tale connects to the broader themes of the Harry Potter series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this deep dive into one of the wizarding world's most complex characters has sparked your interest, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We've got so many more magical mysteries to explore together, from other tragic figures like Tom Riddle's transformation into Voldemort, to the hidden histories of magical creatures, to the untold stories of secondary characters who shaped the wizarding world in ways we never realized. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest magical content, and remember, in a world full of dark magic and impossible curses, the most powerful magic of all is still understanding, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Until next time, keep the magic alive, and remember, everyone deserves to have their story told, with understanding and compassion. Even those who seem like monsters might once have been something more. See you in the next adventure.